The human saved her life. Not knowing she was the missing Empress of the Stars, Captain Elias Varn had seen worse in the asteroid belt than he ever cared to remember. Jagged rocks and metal wreckage floated in the darkness, remnants of ships that had tried and failed to traverse this part of space. It was a dangerous stretch, abandoned by most traders and explorers. Yet for scavengers like Elias, it was paradise. Every broken hull or lost freighter held tech, supplies, or sometimes rare treasures. Today, however, the belt felt different. The air on his ship hummed with tension, a low vibration that seemed to come from the very rocks themselves. Elias maneuvered his ship, the Nomad, through a narrow canyon of asteroids. The ship groaned, sensors alerting him to a spinning chunk of debris only meters away. He adjusted the thrusters with a flick of his wrist, narrowly avoiding a collision. He was careful, calculating every movement because a single mistake here meant death. He had lived through enough close calls to know better than to take chances. Then, in the distance, his sensors picked up something unusual, a small blip moving at high speed. It wasn't the slow drift of a wreck or the erratic movement of a broken satellite. This was deliberate. Someone or something was in trouble. Elias leaned closer to the console, narrowing his eyes at the screen. It was a small escape pod, metal scorched and dented, drifting straight toward a shattered space station. Elias cursed under his breath. "Poor soul," he muttered. Without hesitation, he veered the Nomad toward the pod. Time was short. The station had been unstable for years, a danger to any passing ship, and now gravity distortions from a nearby asteroid made the approach even more treacherous. He gritted his teeth as alarms went off, dodging debris and bursts of radiation from the decaying station. The pod came into view, battered and sparking. Elias activated the docking grapplers and launched them toward the pod. Seconds stretched like hours as he guided the grapplers to attach. With a loud clang, the pod latched onto the Nomad. He exhaled, heart pounding, and pulled it inside the cargo bay. The hatch hissed open, revealing the occupant. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, unconscious and bleeding from a deep gash on her shoulder. Her uniform was unfamiliar, sleek metallic, marked with an insignia Elias didn't recognize. Her hair, dark and tangled, floated slightly in the artificial gravity as he carried her to the medbed. "Hang in there," Elias said, examining her wounds. He worked quickly, cleaning the blood and patching the deep gash with antiseptic and clamps. She stirred slightly, a weak groan escaping her lips, but her eyes remained closed. He adjusted the oxygen mask to ensure she was breathing steadily. As he worked, Elias noticed the insignia again. It looked intricate, almost royal, with a star-shaped crest at its center. Yet he didn't recognize it, not that it mattered. The young woman was alive, and that was all that mattered. Suddenly, a sharp ping from the sensors drew his attention. A fleet of ships had picked up the pod's distress beacon. They were fast, far faster than the Nomad, and clearly heavily armed. Elias cursed again. "They're coming for you," he muttered, glancing down at her pale face. She was just a stranger to him, yet in that moment, a sense of responsibility filled him. He wouldn't let anyone take her, not while she was helpless. He activated the ship's thrusters and took a sharp turn, weaving through the asteroid field. The pursuing ships followed, shooting bursts of plasma that struck the rocks around him, sending fragments flying. Elias gritted his teeth, pulling the Nomad into tighter turns, dodging debris and enemy fire alike. Every move relied on human intuition and split-second decision-making, something no machine could replicate perfectly. The young woman groaned again, opening her eyes. They were a deep, intense green, full of confusion and pain. She looked around the cargo bay, bewildered. "Where am I?" she whispered. Her voice was soft but had a strange authority to it. Elias couldn't help but notice her presence, even in her weakened state. "You're safe for now," he said, keeping his eyes on the sensors. "I'm Elias. I found you out there." She tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her body. Elias gently pressed her back. "Don't move, you're hurt, really hurt." He worked quickly to stabilize her further, cleaning burns and bruises and monitoring her vitals. She looked around at the small, rugged interior of the ship, her eyes wide, like someone seeing a world for the first time. "Who am I?" she asked again, panic creeping into her voice. Elias shook his head. "I don't know, you're alive, that's all I can say." "Do you remember anything?" She closed her eyes, trying to focus, but only fragments came back, flashes of fire, a command room in chaos, voices screaming. She shivered, and Elias wrapped a blanket around her. "You'll be okay," he said, more to convince himself than her. He adjusted the ship's shields and plotted a course for a nearby human colony, a small hidden settlement at the edge of explored space. It was risky, pursuers were fast, but it was their best chance. As they flew through the asteroid belt, Elias worked tirelessly, repairing minor damage to the ship from the earlier debris collisions. He had done this countless times before, but today it felt different. He wasn't just salvaging or surviving, he was protecting someone's life. Something primal inside him, the human instinct to protect, to help, drove him forward. The young woman, meanwhile, stared out the viewport, her green eyes fixed on the jagged rocks and distant stars. She felt strange, disconnected from everything she once knew. Her mind, foggy and fragmented, couldn't grasp why she was alive, why a human she didn't know risked everything for her. She couldn't remember her name, her place in the universe, or why she mattered. All she knew was fear, pain, and a strange trust in the man who had saved her. Hours passed. The fleet behind them had slowed, deciding the chase was too dangerous in the asteroid field. Elias didn't relax. He knew this was only temporary. Still, he allowed himself a brief moment to look at her, studying the curve of her jaw, the determination in her eyes even in weakness. She was more than she appeared, even if he didn't yet know how much. When they finally cleared the asteroid belt and approached open space, Elias set a course for the hidden colony. It was a human outpost, modest and unassuming, nestled on a small planet with a thin atmosphere and rugged terrain. Few would notice them, and the technology there could help stabilize her fully. As the ship descended through the planet's thin clouds, the young woman's memory began to stir, fragment by fragment. She saw flashes of a throne room, a crown, voices giving commands, and a galaxy that seemed to bend to her will. Her chest tightened, but she pushed the memories away. They were confusing, overwhelming, and she didn't trust them yet. Elias, unaware of her true identity, landed the nomad safely on the rocky surface. He guided her out of the ship and into the small med bay of the colony. He tended to her injuries with practiced hands, using a combination of human technology and resourcefulness that surprised even him. "You'll need rest," he said, "and you'll need to tell me your name soon. We can't stay here forever." She nodded weakly, the weight of her confusion heavy on her shoulders. She didn't know her name. She didn't know her purpose. Yet something deep inside her stirred, an instinct to survive, to fight, to reclaim what had been lost. Outside, the twin suns of the small planet cast long shadows across the rocky landscape. The fleet that had chased them would not give up easily. Somewhere in the darkness of space, enemies waited, but for now, she was alive. And she owed it to a human who had acted without thought for reward or glory, simply because it was the right thing to do. Elias sat beside her as she drifted into a fitful sleep, thinking about the strange insignia on her uniform. There was something familiar about it, but he couldn't place it. Not that it mattered. She was alive, and that was enough. He didn't know it yet, but the human who had rescued her would become central to the fate of stars themselves. For now, all he could do was wait, watch, and protect. The galaxy was vast, and danger lurked in every corner. But Elias Varn had one truth on his side. Humans never gave up, even when the odds were impossible. And whatever lay ahead, he would face it with courage, because that was what humans did. The young woman stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't understand. Elias leaned closer, listening. Her voice was weak, yet it carried a strange authority. Somehow he knew her story was far bigger than this small planet, far bigger than the asteroid belt they had escaped. He didn't know she was an Empress. He didn't know the role she would play in the galaxy. All he knew was that he had saved her life, and sometimes that was the most powerful thing a human could do. The sun set behind the jagged mountains, casting the med bay in golden light. Outside, the wind swept across the rocks, carrying with it the distant hum of the universe. In that quiet moment, two lives had intersected, one human, one something far greater, and neither would ever be the same. Somewhere in the stars, destiny had begun to stir. The small med bay of the hidden colony was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of life support systems. Outside, the jagged mountains stretched endlessly, lit by the fading twin suns. Inside, Captain Elias Varn watched the young woman as she slept. Her chest rose and fell steadily, her breathing finally calm. Yet the tension in her face spoke of dreams she could not fully remember, memories hidden deep in her mind. Elias had never met anyone like her. She was small, frail in appearance, yet there was a strength about her, an unspoken authority that even unconscious demanded attention. He did not know who she truly was, only that she had survived against impossible odds. And he had saved her life without thought of reward or glory. That was simply what humans did. Hours passed, and the quiet of the colony was broken by the sound of a soft groan. The woman's eyes fluttered open, green eyes scanning the room. Confusion and fear filled her gaze. She tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her shoulder. "Easy," Elias said, placing a steady hand on her arm. "You're safe here, you're hurt, but you're going to be okay." She looked at him, her voice trembling. Who are you?" "Elias," he replied. "I found you floating in an escape pod. You were going to crash into that asteroid station. I couldn't let that happen." Her brow furrowed as she tried to process his words. I don't remember. I can't remember anything." Elias shook his head gently. "That's okay, just rest. We'll figure it out." He studied her carefully, noticing the uniform she wore. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek and metallic with an intricate star-shaped insignia on the chest. It looked important, but Elias didn't know why. He didn't ask. It didn't matter. She was alive, and that was enough. They were interrupted by a warning beep from the colony's external sensors. Elias frowned and quickly moved to the console. On the screen, a cluster of fast-moving ships appeared on the edge of the system. The same fleet that had chased them through the asteroid belt. They had tracked the escape pod to the planet. "They're back," he muttered, tension sharpening his features. "And they're closing fast." The woman watched him, her green eyes wide with alarm. They want me." Elias didn't answer immediately. He didn't know, and he didn't want to scare her more than necessary. "I don't know," he said finally, "but we have to be ready. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." She studied him, sensing something in his confidence, some stubbornness that refused to give up no matter the danger. There was something different about him, something human, that she had never known in her own life. He was not powerful in the way rulers or soldiers were, yet his presence alone inspired hope. As they prepared the colony's defenses, the woman observed Elias in action. He moved swiftly, methodically, checking energy levels, reinforcing shields, and calibrating weapons. Every step was precise but inventive. He used scavenged tech from previous missions, devices and tools that humans had adapted in ways no alien army would expect. She watched, fascinated. Even without her memories, she felt drawn to his resourcefulness, to the way he faced danger head-on without hesitation. "Why do you risk your life for me?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. Elias paused, glancing at her. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because you're in trouble and someone has to help. That's what humans do. We fight when we need to, we protect when we can, and we never give up, even when the odds are against us." She looked at him, studying his eyes. There was something different about humans, she realized. Unlike the elite officers she once commanded, humans did not care about status, crowns, or commands. They acted with intuition, compassion, and courage. Elias was human in the purest sense, and she began to understand, even in her confusion, why she had survived because of him. Hours passed. The fleet drew nearer, and Elias prepared the colony for the inevitable attack. He used the terrain to their advantage, hiding ships and creating traps with human ingenuity. The enemy would expect brute force, but he knew humans could think differently. They could use cunning, improvisation, and daring to overcome superior technology. The woman assisted as best she could, moving with surprising grace and coordination. She instinctively understood strategy, even if her mind was fragmented. She watched Elias place energy decoys, reroute power, and manipulate communications to mislead the incoming fleet. Even in her weakened state, she could see the brilliance of his mind in action. As night fell over the rocky planet, the fleet arrived, its ships cutting through the darkness like predators. Elias' heart pounded, but he remained calm, guiding the defense systems with precision. The first wave of energy blasts struck the outer defenses, but Elias' preparations held. The decoys misled the enemy, causing several ships to collide with the jagged mountains or waste energy on empty targets. The woman watched in awe, her memories flickering like fragments of a shattered mirror. She did not yet remember who she was, but she knew this man, the human, had saved her again, using intelligence and bravery rather than raw power. She felt a spark within her, a sense of hope that had been buried under fear and confusion. The battle raged through the night. The humans, though outnumbered and outgunned, adapted quickly. They anticipated movements, set traps, and exploited weaknesses the enemy never expected. Ilias moved through the control room with calm determination, issuing orders and making split-second decisions. He demonstrated what humans could do when faced with impossible odds: survive, adapt, and overcome. At one point, a larger enemy ship broke through the outer defenses, firing directly at the med bay. Ilias reacted instantly, redirecting power to the shield and activating a hidden turret system. The blast hit the enemy ship's hull, causing a chain reaction that sent it spiraling into the mountains. The woman stared, stunned. The human she had once considered ordinary had just turned the tide of battle with creativity and courage. As dawn broke over the rocky peaks, the fleet finally retreated, battered and confused. Ilias slumped in his chair, exhausted but triumphant. He glanced at the woman who had stood quietly beside him through the chaos, her green eyes reflecting both fear and admiration. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us." Ilias smiled, though fatigue tugged at his features. "We did it," he corrected. "Humans don't fight alone and we don't give up. That's why we survive." She nodded, trying to absorb the words, feeling a strange resonance in them. She did not yet know her own power, her past, or the empire she had lost. But she understood this. The human who had saved her life possessed qualities no technology or army could match. Courage, intuition, and compassion, the very essence of humanity, had kept them alive. In the quiet aftermath, as the med bay hummed and systems repaired themselves, the woman's memories began to stir further. Flashes of a throne room, a crown, and the stars stretched across her mind. She remembered voices giving commands, planets falling, and people depending on her. Fear gripped her chest, but so did a spark of determination. She could feel the weight of her lost empire pressing on her, even if her mind could not yet fully grasp it. Ilias noticed her change in demeanor, the shift from confusion to focus. "You're going to be okay," he said again. "We'll figure it out together." She looked at him, searching his face. She did not yet know how important she truly was, or how central humans would be to the survival of her people. But she trusted him, and in that trust she found strength. The night passed, stars wheeling overhead through the observation dome of the med bay. Outside, the winds swept across the rocky plains, carrying whispers of distant worlds. Inside, a human and a woman who would one day be an empress shared a quiet moment of connection, a bond forged through danger, survival, and trust. By morning, the woman could move more freely. Ilias helped her to her feet, guiding her through the med bay. She examined the insignia on her uniform, tracing the lines with her fingers. Something about it stirred a memory, but it was not yet clear. "Who am I?" she asked again, voice steadier this time. Ilias hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know, you're alive. You've survived against impossible odds. That's what matters right now. We'll figure out the rest." She nodded, silently acknowledging the truth of his words. For the first time since waking, she felt a sense of purpose, not yet her own, but one growing from the bond with this human. Together, they had survived an impossible chase and a deadly battle. Together, they would face whatever came next. Ilias looked at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. He didn't yet know her name or her past. He didn't know she was the missing Empress of the Stars. All he knew was that she was alive and that he would protect her with every ounce of his human strength, ingenuity, and courage. Somewhere in the stars, the galaxy continued its dance of power, danger, and ambition. Yet in this small, hidden colony, human ingenuity had turned the tide. And for the woman who would one day reclaim her empire, the bond with a single human would shape the future in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The suns rose higher, casting golden light across the rocky plains. Ilias and the woman, still fragile but determined, stood side by side. Outside, the distant hum of approaching ships reminded them that the galaxy was vast, and their challenges were only beginning. But together they had survived, and that was the first step toward changing everything. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that she could live. And perhaps she could even fight. The rocky planet was quiet now, but Ilias knew that peace would not last long. The fleet that had pursued them would regroup, and sooner or later they would return. The young woman, still fragile but recovering, sat on a bench in the colony's main hall, staring out at the jagged horizon. Her mind was restless, flickering between confusion, fear, and faint traces of memory. She remembered flashes, thrones, crowns, stars stretching across vast galaxies, but they were fragments, incomplete and elusive. Elias approached quietly, carrying 2 cups of recycled water. He handed one to her, watching her fingers wrap around it, hands still trembling slightly. "Drink," he said softly. "You need strength if we're going to stay ahead of them." She nodded and took a careful sip, her green eyes still distant. I feel like I should know who I am," she admitted. "But it's all shadows, nothing makes sense." Elias sat beside her. "Memories take time, you've been through a lot. What matters is now. You survived. That's proof you're stronger than you think." Her gaze drifted to him, searching. She did not yet know her true identity, that she was Lyra, the missing Empress of the Eridani Empire. But she felt an instinctive pull to this human who had saved her life twice now. There was courage in him, but also something else: loyalty, compassion, and creativity. Humans were unpredictable, capable of thinking in ways no alien fleet could anticipate. He had saved her not because of her status, but because he understood the value of life, the worth of action without expectation. You are remarkable," she whispered, almost to herself. Elias smiled faintly, brushing the comment off. "I'm just human," he said. "That's all we have: our brains, our courage, our hearts. We adapt, we survive, and sometimes we help others survive too." Her mind lingered on his words. They were simple, yet carried a truth she had never known. In her past life, people followed her because of her title, because of the power she wielded. But this human followed no one. He acted from instinct, from principle. And somehow that was more powerful than any army, any weapon, or any throne. Hours later, as the twin suns sank low, Elias began preparing the Nomad for departure. They could not stay on the planet. The fleet would find them eventually, and it was only a matter of time before the enemy outmatched the colony's defenses. He checked the ship systems, ensuring shields and engines were ready for sudden jumps through hyperspace. Every adjustment, every calibration was precise. It was human ingenuity at its finest, using limited resources to create maximum advantage. The woman observed him, now moving with a little more confidence. She assisted where she could, though her injuries limited her strength. Her instincts, however, were sharp. She began to notice patterns in the enemy's tactics, the timing of attacks, and the best ways to evade pursuit. Even without her memories, a part of her still remembered command, strategy, and leadership. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked as he adjusted the navigational systems. "Because someone has to," Elias replied without looking up. "It's not about reward or glory, it's about doing the right thing. Someone had to save you, and I was the one who could. That's it." She studied him, trying to understand the depth of his statement. Humans were strange creatures, weak compared to many other species in strength and technology, yet somehow unstoppable in courage and determination. She realized that this simple human, who had no armies or ships of his own, had outsmarted a fleet with more firepower than she had ever seen. His ingenuity was unmatched, and his loyalty unquestionable. When the Nomad was ready, they lifted off quietly, leaving the small colony behind. The ascent was smooth, the ship gliding over the jagged peaks as if it belonged to the night sky. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, reminding the woman of the vastness of the universe she had once known as hers. Elias plotted a course toward the outer edges of human-controlled space, a region less patrolled and dangerous only because few dared to enter. He hoped it would give them time, a chance to plan, and a moment to understand what lay ahead. During the journey, the woman continued to wrestle with fragments of her memory. She remembered a throne, a crown, and a galaxy-wide empire that had fallen. Faces appeared in her mind, loyal advisors, citizens, and soldiers, but the images were hazy, fleeting. She had been someone powerful, someone important, yet now she was dependent on a human. The realization unsettled her. She had always commanded, not followed. She had always been in control, not rescued. Elias noticed her silence and offered reassurance. "You're not weak," he said. "Survival doesn't mean being the strongest. It means being smart, courageous, and willing to do what's necessary. You've survived this far. That's more than most could manage." She nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He was right. Survival was more than strength. It was intelligence, courage, and determination. And in that moment, she began to understand what humans were truly capable of. As they traveled, Elias shared stories of human ingenuity. He spoke of colonies surviving in harsh environments, of humans adapting to planets with toxic atmospheres, and of ships built from scavenged parts that could outmaneuver fleets 10 times their size. The woman listened, fascinated. She had never known a people so underestimated, so seemingly ordinary, yet so capable of extraordinary acts. Night fell again in the vastness of space, and the stars shimmered around the nomad. The woman stood at the viewport, her reflection merging with the distant constellations. A strange sense of belonging stirred in her chest, though she did not yet know why. She realized that survival was not just about reclaiming what she had lost, but about understanding the people who had saved her, the humans who thrived despite limitations, and the courage that made them different. Suddenly, alarms blared. Elias leapt to the console, eyes scanning the incoming readings. A small fleet had detected them, closing in fast. He gritted his teeth. "Looks like we've got company," he muttered. The woman tensed. "We can't outrun them," she said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "We don't need to outrun them," Elias replied with a grin. "We'll outthink them." He activated a series of maneuvers, weaving the Nomad through a dense asteroid field. The pursuing fleet followed, firing energy blasts that splintered rocks and sent debris tumbling through space. Elias used every trick he knew, flares, decoys, and unexpected turns, to confuse the enemy. The woman watched, impressed. Even without her full memories, she could see the brilliance of his strategy. During the chase, fragments of her past flickered in her mind. Commands shouted, alliances forged, a galaxy at war. She remembered the loyalty of those who followed her, the responsibility that weighed on her shoulders. She realized that the human beside her possessed a similar quality, though it came from instinct rather than title. He inspired loyalty, not because of rank or crown, but because of action and principle. Hours passed and the fleet finally fell back, unwilling to risk more ships against an opponent they could not predict. The woman exhaled, relief flooding her. She turned to Elias. You did it again," she said softly. Elias shrugged, though a small smile tugged at his lips. "We did it, that's what humans do. We survive, we adapt, and we help each other when it matters." She studied him, understanding dawning. Humans were more than she had ever imagined. Weak in appearance, yes, but their courage, creativity, and loyalty made them stronger than any fleet, any weapon, any empire. And this one human had saved her life twice. Somehow, she felt that he would continue to do so, no matter what dangers lay ahead. The journey continued, the stars stretching endlessly before them. The woman's memories grew clearer with each passing day, fragments forming patterns, hints of her true identity. She did not yet remember her name, Lyra, or the empire she had lost, but she began to grasp that her survival, and the survival of her people, depended on humans like Elias. By the time they reached the edge of human-controlled space, she was moving with more confidence, assisting with navigation and systems checks. She still depended on him, but now she contributed. Together, they were more than a rescuer and rescued. They were partners, a human and a future Empress, navigating the dangers of a galaxy that had nearly destroyed her. Elias glanced at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You're stronger than you think," he said. She met his gaze, determination flickering in her green eyes. "I'm beginning to understand that," she replied, "and I'm beginning to understand humans." For the first time since waking, she felt a glimmer of hope, not just for herself, but for the future. Somewhere in the galaxy, her people awaited, scattered, and in need of leadership. And somehow, she knew that with humans like Elias by her side, she might yet reclaim what had been lost. The stars stretched endlessly around the Nomad, vast and infinite. The journey was far from over. The fleet would return. Challenges would come. But for now, the human and the woman who would one day be Empress shared a quiet victory, a bond forged through danger, ingenuity, and trust. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope that the future might still be hers. The Nomad sailed quietly through the dark expanse of space, the stars stretching endlessly around it. Captain Elias Varn had plotted a careful course toward the outer reaches of known human space, a region where few traveled and even fewer watched. It was here, on these edges, that rumors whispered of scattered Eridani survivors, soldiers, diplomats, and citizens hiding from the alien forces that had overrun the Empire. The woman, who had begun to remember fragments of her past, moved with renewed purpose across the ship's narrow corridors. She now knew that her name was Lyra, though the title she had once held, Empress, felt distant, almost unreal. Memories of her throne, her people, and her advisors flickered in her mind, but they were incomplete, like shattered glass. She did not yet know the full extent of her power or the responsibilities that lay ahead, but a spark of determination had ignited within her. She would reclaim what had been lost. Elias watched her closely. There was a change in her demeanor, subtle but undeniable. She moved with quiet confidence now, helping with systems checks, navigating, and even offering suggestions for evasive maneuvers. Yet despite her progress, she remained humanly vulnerable, and Elias knew the dangers they would soon face were far greater than the fleet they had evaded in the asteroid belt. "They'll be looking for us," Elias said one evening as they drifted near a small, uncharted system. "Once the word spreads that someone survived the attack, others will come. We have to find your people before they do." Lyra nodded. "I know," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with worry. "We must gather the survivors. My empire, it's not gone, it's just scattered. If we can unite them, we have a chance to fight back." Elias smirked, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Then let's get to work." Their first stop was a mining colony on the fringe of the system. It was a small settlement, mostly human, but rumors suggested that a few Aridani refugees had sought shelter there. Elias guided the nomad through the asteroid belts surrounding the colony, using every trick he knew to avoid detection. He deployed energy decoys, plotted deceptive paths through the field, and even used small, remote-controlled drones to draw attention away from the main ship. Human ingenuity had always been their greatest weapon, and today it would save lives again. As they landed on the colony, Lyra felt a strange mix of hope and fear. The settlement was modest, built into the rocky surface with metal panels and tunnels that twisted like a labyrinth. Inside, she saw families and workers going about their daily routines. Their faces were human, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. People who had lived through fear and loss knew how to read it. Elias and Lyra moved cautiously, asking discreet questions and searching for signs of Aridani survivors. Hours passed with little success. Then in a small storage tunnel they found them. A handful of Aridani soldiers, worn and weary, their uniforms tattered, their eyes reflecting despair and disbelief. Lyra's heart raced. These were her people, loyal advisors and warriors who had survived the fall of the Empire. She stepped forward, voice trembling with both authority and relief. "You survived," she said simply. The soldiers froze, staring at her as if seeing a ghost. Then slowly recognition dawned in their eyes. One of them, a man named Dirk, stepped forward. It's you," he whispered. "Empress Lyra, you live." Lyra nodded, tears threatening to fall. "Yes," she said. "I live, and we have a chance to rebuild, but we must act quickly. Elias has helped me survive so far, and now we need to unite the remaining forces." "Can I count on you?" Dirk straightened, pride and determination returning to his posture. "Always, my Empress. We will follow you wherever you lead." Elias watched quietly, noting the loyalty and courage in these soldiers. It reminded him once again of human qualities, the ability to adapt, to trust, and to rise against impossible odds. Lyra, too, seemed to draw strength from their presence, her confidence growing with each passing moment. With the Aridani survivors gathered, they began to plan their next moves. They needed more people, more ships, and a secure base from which to coordinate their efforts. Elias suggested using the Nomad's stealth capabilities to travel between hidden human colonies, seeking allies and resources. Lyra agreed, realizing that humans were not just a tool, they were indispensable partners. Days turned into weeks as they traveled, meeting scattered Aridani and forming alliances with human settlements along the way. Each encounter tested their resolve, but Elia's ingenuity and Lyra's emerging leadership allowed them to succeed. Humans were not physically stronger than the enemy, nor did they wield the same advanced technology, but their creativity, adaptability, and loyalty made them a force to be reckoned with. One evening, while plotting their next route in the Nomad's cramped navigation room, Lyra finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Elias, why me? Why risk so much for someone you didn't know?" Elias leaned back, hands folded behind his head. "Because it's the right thing to do. Life is valuable. Helping others isn't about reward, it's about principle. I saved you because you needed it. Humans survive because we fight, we adapt, and we help each other. That's who we are." Lyra considered his words, a deep understanding settling in her chest. She had once believed that power came from armies, crowns, and fear. But here, in the edge of human space, she saw a different kind of power, one born from compassion, ingenuity, and courage. It was a power that could not be taken by force, and a power that could rebuild an empire from nothing. Their journey was not without challenges. Enemy scouts occasionally appeared, probing their defenses, testing their reactions. Each encounter demanded quick thinking and adaptation. Elias employed human tactics that were unconventional yet effective: decoys, misdirection, and leveraging environmental hazards to neutralize superior forces. Lyra learned from him, absorbing the lessons of improvisation and strategy that her formal education had never taught. During one particularly tense encounter, a squadron of enemy ships attempted to trap them in a narrow asteroid corridor. Elias activated the Nomad's stealth thrusters, weaving through the rocks in a daring display of skill. Lyra assisted by monitoring enemy frequencies, predicting movements, and suggesting evasive maneuvers. Together, they turned a potentially fatal situation into a resounding victory. The enemy fleet, unable to anticipate the humans' ingenuity, retreated in frustration. By the time they reached a secluded planet with a small hidden base, Lyra's confidence had grown considerably. She addressed the gathered Eridani and human allies with a newfound authority. "We will rebuild," she declared. "We will gather our forces, strengthen our alliances, and reclaim what was taken. The galaxy may have thought my empire was lost, but we will rise again, and this time we will do it with humans at our side." The assembly erupted in cheers and renewed determination. Lyra felt the weight of responsibility, but she also felt the strength of her allies, particularly Elias, whose steadfast courage had made all this possible. She realized that her future, and the future of her people, depended not on her crown alone, but on the unity between humans and Eridani. Elias watched her, a quiet pride in his heart. He had saved her life, yes, but more importantly, he had helped her rediscover her purpose. Humans were not rulers or conquerors in the traditional sense, but their qualities, courage, ingenuity, loyalty, made them the kind of allies that could turn the tide of history. Lyra understood this now, and together they had begun to forge a new path. The first steps toward reclaiming the empire were taken, but the journey was far from over. Enemy forces were vast and determined, and the scattered remnants of the Eridani Empire needed leadership, resources, and hope. Yet for the first time since the fall of her throne, Lyra felt that hope. With humans like Elias by her side, survival was possible, rebuilding was possible, and victory, though distant, was no longer impossible. That night, as the twin moons of the hidden planet rose in the sky, Lyra stood on a ridge overlooking the base. The wind stirred her hair, and the stars above seemed to whisper possibilities. She had survived unimaginable danger, been rescued by a human whose courage and ingenuity had astounded her, and begun to gather the pieces of her shattered empire. Elias joined her, standing silently at her side. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice calm, almost reflective. "But the real work begins now." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of determination she had not known for years. "Yes," she said, "and we will face it together, humans and Eridani side by side. This is how we will reclaim what was lost, and ensure the galaxy never forgets that courage, loyalty, and ingenuity can triumph over force." The two of them stood in silence, looking out at the stars. Somewhere beyond the horizon, enemy fleets moved, unaware that a new alliance was forming, one that combined human resilience and ingenuity with the strength and legacy of an empire. The galaxy was about to witness a rebirth, and at its center stood a human who had saved an Empress, and the Empress who had rediscovered her purpose. The winds of destiny were rising, carrying with them the promise of rebellion, strategy, and the rekindling of hope. And at the heart of it all, humans, unexpected, underestimated, yet extraordinary, would shape the future of stars. The ruins of Lyra's capital planet stretched before them, a once great city now broken and scarred by war. Towers that had once touched the sky were reduced to jagged spires, streets were crumbled and empty, and the air carried the acrid smell of burned fuel and scorched metal. From orbit, the devastation was overwhelming. For a moment, Lyra hesitated, staring at the remnants of what had been hers. Then she straightened her shoulders, determination hardening in her green eyes. "We reclaim it," she said quietly, turning to Elias. "Every inch, every street, every life we can save. This is our chance." Elias nodded, his hands on the console of the Nomad. "We've faced impossible odds before. We'll do it again. Humans survive, Lyra, and so will your people." They descended into the atmosphere carefully, using the ship's stealth thrusters to avoid detection. Enemy forces still patrolled the skies, but Ilia's human ingenuity had prepared them. Hidden energy fields, decoy drones, and carefully timed maneuvers allowed the Nomad to slip past most sensors. Every calculated movement relied on instinct, creativity, and understanding the enemy's predictable arrogance, a combination only humans could master. On the surface, Lyra surveyed her soldiers, both Eridani and humans. They were nervous but ready. Scattered and under-equipped, they could not face the enemy head-on. But with strategy, ingenuity, and the element of surprise, they had a chance. Ilias had taught them to use the terrain, improvisational traps, and quick, unexpected strikes. Humans were not the strongest, but they were clever, unpredictable, and brave. Lyra led the way, walking among her troops. "We fight together," she said. "Eridani and humans alike, today we reclaim our home." As they moved through the ruined streets, enemy patrols appeared. Ilias and the soldiers used decoys, traps, and rapid maneuvers to neutralize them silently. The humans' improvisation turned narrow alleyways into tactical advantages, using debris, broken vehicles, and even the shifting shadows to confuse and disable the enemy. Lyra, despite her fragile state, coordinated movements and gave orders with authority, combining instinct with her natural leadership. They reached the central plaza, where the throne building still stood, heavily damaged but intact. Enemy reinforcements had gathered there, expecting an easy defense. They were unaware that the humans and Eridani soldiers were not predictable. Ilias guided small teams to strategic positions, while Lyra took the lead in rallying the troops. The battle began with careful precision. Humans used guerrilla tactics, ambushing from unexpected angles, creating smoke and reflective diversions, and exploiting every weak point. The Eridani soldiers, inspired by Lyra's presence and courage, moved with renewed energy. It was a symphony of improvisation and determination, a display of human ingenuity paired with Lyra's leadership. During the fight, Lyra noticed something remarkable. Humans, despite their physical limitations compared to the alien forces, were capable of actions the enemy could not predict. They adapted instantly to changes, thought creatively, and displayed courage in ways that inspired everyone around them. She realized that this was the key to reclaiming her empire, not brute force, but intelligence, ingenuity, and the loyalty humans inspired. Ilias moved with the calm precision of someone who had faced countless impossible situations. He coordinated traps, calculated enemy responses, and even guided Eridani soldiers to use terrain advantages. A few enemy soldiers attempted to flank them, but humans and Eridani acted together, anticipating the attack and turning it into a counterassault. Hours passed, the battle raging through the plaza and surrounding districts. Lyra moved steadily, rallying soldiers, giving orders, and inspiring courage. She no longer relied solely on her title. She relied on action, strategy, and the trust she had earned from both humans and Eridani. Her people responded, morale rising with every successful maneuver. The enemy, though powerful, was unprepared for this kind of fight. They expected fear, hesitation, and surrender. Instead, they faced humans and Eridani working in unison, thinking in unpredictable ways and striking with precision and courage. One by one, enemy ships and squads were disabled, their attacks neutralized by traps and clever tactics. In the heart of the plaza, the throne building loomed, where the final enemy commander awaited. He was a towering figure, clad in heavy armor, wielding weapons that could annihilate soldiers in seconds. Lyra knew that this confrontation would determine the fate of the planet and her people. She turned to Ilias. "Are you ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Humans never back down." "Let's end this." They approached the throne building carefully. Ilias led small teams through side entrances, disabling weapons and cutting off reinforcements, while Lyra confronted the commander directly. His voice boomed, demanding surrender. "I do not surrender," Lyra shouted, her voice carrying authority and defiance. The commander attacked, but Lyra's instincts, partially recovered memory, and Ilia's guidance allowed her to anticipate his moves. With precise coordination, they maneuvered through the battle, striking at weak points, using the environment to their advantage. The humans' creativity proved crucial. They rigged collapsing pillars, energy traps, and reflective panels to confuse the commander and his forces. Finally, in a dramatic showdown, Lyra faced the commander with Elias at her side. The humans had created a trap, isolating the commander from reinforcements. Using quick thinking, strategy, and courage, Lyra delivered the final strike, disabling the commander's weapons and capturing him. Silence fell over the plaza. The enemy forces, seeing their leader defeated and their tactics outsmarted, surrendered. Eridani and humans alike cheered, victory echoing through the ruined streets. The capital was theirs once more. Lyra stood atop the steps of the throne building, looking out at her reclaimed city. The scars of war were everywhere, but hope now thrived. She turned to Elias, gratitude and admiration shining in her eyes. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved more than my life, you saved my empire." Elias shrugged modestly. "I just did what humans do. We survive, we adapt, and we help when it matters. You led your people." "Humans helped make it possible, but the courage came from you too." Lyra smiled, understanding the truth in his words. Humans had been underestimated by her enemies, but their ingenuity, courage, and loyalty had turned the tide. She realized that her empire could rise again, not because of her crown alone, but because humans and Eridani could work together. The following days were filled with rebuilding. Humans helped repair the city, restore communication networks, and coordinate supplies. Eridani soldiers trained alongside humans, sharing knowledge and learning strategies. Together, they rebuilt infrastructure, fortified defenses, and prepared for the challenges still ahead. Lyra addressed her people in the central plaza. "Today we reclaim not just our city, but our hope. Humans have shown us that strength is not only in armies or weapons, but in ingenuity, courage, and loyalty. Together, Eridani and humans will rise, stronger than ever." Cheers erupted, echoing through the streets. Lyra felt a surge of pride and hope. Her empire was not only restored, it was stronger, united with humans who had proven their worth in every way. Elias stood quietly at her side, watching the celebrations. He had no desire for crowns or power. Yet he felt satisfaction in knowing that humans had made a difference, that their courage and ingenuity had saved lives and shaped history. Lyra had been saved, her empire restored, and humans had played a crucial role. As the sun rose over the rebuilt capital, Lyra walked beside Elias through the streets. Citizens, Eridani and humans alike, paused to offer gratitude. She realized that the galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, but their courage, ingenuity, and loyalty could change the course of entire civilizations. Lyra turned to Elias. "The empire is ours, but the work has just begun. Will you stay with me?" Elias smiled. "I'll help when I can, but my place is still out there, exploring, surviving, and helping those in need. Humans do what they must not for glory, but because it's right. That said, I'll always be your ally." Lyra nodded, understanding perfectly. They did not need titles or crowns to form a bond built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Together, humans and Eridani would face the future, stronger and united. From the capital's steps, Lyra gazed at the stars. Somewhere out there, scattered survivors awaited, fleets prepared, and the galaxy watched. But she no longer felt fear. She had humans at her side, allies who could think, adapt, and inspire. Her empire would rise again, not through fear, not through domination, but through courage, ingenuity, and the partnership of two species who had learned to trust each other. The sun rose higher, casting golden light across the city. The ruins of war were now shadows of the past. Hope thrived. Humans had proven themselves remarkable, and Lyra had reclaimed not only her throne, but her destiny. The galaxy was vast, and challenges remained, but for the first time in years, she felt certain that they could face anything. The human who had saved her life had shown her the true meaning of strength, courage, and loyalty, and together they had changed the fate of stars. Lyra lifted her hand toward the sky, as if touching the infinite universe. "The stars belong to those who dare," she whispered. "And together we will reach them." Elias stood beside her, silent but unwavering, a reminder that humanity's spirit could never be defeated. Together they had reclaimed a lost empire, united species, and proven that courage, ingenuity, and loyalty were the true powers of the galaxy. And somewhere beyond the stars, the universe waited, vast and endless, for the next chapter of this extraordinary alliance.